Welcome to Immigreats, the podcast that highlights stories of immigrants making great contributions in their adopted countries. My name is Munatsi and I'm your host. I was born and raised in Zimbabwe and now live in Texas, USA with my family. Before getting into today's episode, I'm excited to share a word from the first ever sponsor of this Immigreats podcast. And I'm grateful to our friends at Alma Law in Dallas, Texas for signing up to be our first sponsor. Alma Law is one of the top immigration law firms in the United States. They're a great resource for immigrants already in the US and for people looking for professional assistance to move to the United States from other parts of the world. I can confirm that the process of moving to the United States can seem daunting. So having a friend like Alma Law on your side could be very useful. Alma Law specializes in handling all manner of immigration cases, from J-1 physician visas, investors and entrepreneur visa options, family immigration, temporary employment, special petitions, permanent resident adjustments, and even employer compliance. You can call them in the US on 972-573-8575 or email them at help@alma-law.com to schedule a consultation. You can also visit their website for more information, www.alma-law.com for more information. Today's a very special day for me on a personal level. One, because I'm excited to interview an immigrant who's made tremendous contributions to the United States and the world at large. But I'm also excited because this particular immigrant is family to me. Today, I'm going to be speaking with United States Army Brigadier General Amanda Azubuike. Amanda is a general in the U.S. Army, but she's also my cousin. Her late mom, Florence, was my late father, Derek's older sister. They both grew up together in a large family in a very humble place called Mbare in what was then Rhodesia and is now Zimbabwe. And a few years ago, I remember having a conversation with Amanda about my dad and kind of, her memories of my dad as a young girl, especially before Amanda immigrated to the United States. And we were able to bond over those conversations and those memories. And then I also got to spend some, real quality time with her mom, several years ago, before she passed away here in the United States, and got to know her. And she was really dear to me. So been harassing Amanda for a while now to say, hey, would you get on this podcast so I can interview? Because I think your story needs to be told. And we finally were able to get our schedules to align. And thankfully, we'll get to share the story and record it too. So Amanda, welcome to the Immigreats podcast.
It's always an honor and a privilege to do an interview like this, but it's extra special. And it's the only time I've ever done it with a family member. So thanks for having me.
No, thank you. I'm really been excited about this. I've really been excited. Tell us, Amanda, who is Amanda Azubuike? I'd like to just, hear in your words, how you would describe yourself. And then we can talk a little bit more about your background and, where the journey you've traveled to get to this point today.
So again, thanks for having me. How would I describe myself? Interesting. I think because of my being raised primarily by my mom, a single parent, I would say that I am a strong woman, woman of faith, a very positive person. People get thrown challenges all through their life, but I'm one of those people who chooses to see the good in people, who chooses to see the cup half full. My initial response is almost always positive, even if I'm facing something challenging or negative. So I like to think I'm a very positive person. I go through life that way. And I'm extremely thankful for all the blessings and opportunities that have come my way.
That's fantastic. Thank you for that. I do agree that you are very positive and encouraging. And it's always really fun to be around you because of that. This podcast, Immigreats, seeks to tell stories of immigrants that are making great impact in their adopted countries. Can you tell us a little bit about kind of your backstory, where you were born, your family background, what led, because you were not born in the US, and what led you to emigrate into the United States? And then we can talk after that about kind of your early years in the US. But I'd just love for you to tell us about, where you were born, your family, your parents, and, a little bit of that background information just so we can get to know you a little bit better.
Absolutely. So both my parents are African. My mom is from Zimbabwe. Both my parents have passed. I know you mentioned my mom. My mom was born and raised in Zimbabwe, as before stated. And then my dad was born in Nigeria, born and raised in Nigeria. They both, obviously, those countries are very far apart. So once my mom graduated from high school, basically, she moved, I think she was around 18 years old, to England to pursue her nursing degree. My dad did the same thing once he graduated from school in Nigeria, and he pursued law, went to law school in London. And so that's where they met. That's where they were married. I have a sister who's 2 years younger than I. They were married for years. And then at some point when we were young, they got a divorce. At that point, my mom, I think, was just looking for a better life for us as a single parent raising two children. At that point, she was just looking for a better life and more opportunities. And so in the US, they were heavily recruiting nurses. She was a nurse at this point. And so that's when she decided to move. Now, although my mom is from a big family, we had no family in the US. And so we moved to Arkansas, and I often get asked, why did you move to Arkansas? We moved to Arkansas because, again, having no family in the US and wanting some support in a country where she didn't know anybody and having two young children, she had a friend also from Zimbabwe, also went to nursing school with her in London, who just happened to have met her husband, who was in the Air Force in England. And at the time my mom decided to move to the States, they were stationed at Little Rock Air Force Base, which is in Arkansas. So that's how we ended up in Arkansas, long story short. So that's how we moved to the States. That's why we moved to Arkansas. And I was about 14 and my sister was 2 years younger. She was 12 at that time.
Awesome. What was it like transitioning from school in London, kind of the education system there, to because so you would have been in high school when you moved here then?
I was actually in junior high school.
Okay, junior high. Okay. What was that like?
Yes.
The transition?
It was very different. So it was very, very culturally different. Obviously, London is a high tempo, very busy, lots going on, lots of stimulation, and then moving to Arkansas, it was a much slower pace. I will say our initial thought was, wow, everybody is so nice here. It really was that Southern, people were, for the most part, pretty welcoming, especially for a family, with a different last name, looked kind of different, had accents. So generally speaking, everybody was really nice, and you really got that Southern hospitality right off the bat. And it was definitely different. But I think as kids, you're very resilient. It's much easier to assimilate. And I know my sister and I really tried hard to. Especially because I was very shy. And so coming to a new country at that age where all you want to do is fit in, and you didn't fit in because of all the things I've said. But over time, like I said, kids being resilient, we were able to just fine.
Yeah, that's awesome. That's awesome. You started to essentially, your path into the U.S. Army kind of started when you were in high school, right? Can you talk to us a little bit about, what led to you starting to, look into the Army and kind of that initial journey that led you to eventually becoming an officer in the United States Army?
Right. The summer before my senior year, my mom ended up buying a house. It was her first house she bought since being in the country. And so we had to move out of the school district we were in to another school district. And that's how we got into Junior ROTC, because the school had a Junior ROTC program. It was an Air Force Junior ROTC program because it was close to Little Rock Air Force Base. So that was my introduction, my exposure to the military in general and to the Air Force. Junior ROTC is a leadership, citizenship program, and that's kind of why we joined it. We didn't even necessarily join Junior ROTC with the intent to join the military at all. It was just one of those things where we kind of got exposed to something a little bit different, leadership, discipline, those types of things. And it was a good program. And so what happened is, me being the oldest one and the first going to college in the US, our frame of reference for higher education was the British system. I think even in Zimbabwe and Nigeria, because they were British colonies, there was that British influence. And so all we knew, our focus was on academics, and education was huge in our house. It was always expected that you go to college, and your ticket to college from our experience was doing well in school. And it was very much expected of us. We, growing up in England, again, and then again, my parents of African background, extracurricular activities didn't mean anything. It was all about your grades. And so being here in this country, my mom would not allow us to play any sports, do any extracurricular activity, because she was so focused on us getting into college and didn't realize here in the United States, they want a well-rounded student in their college. And I think we've gone in another direction now to where kids' schedules are more, you know what I mean? They're more
Sports
stressful than adult
extracurricular activities, where the academics almost feels like is the backup, right? Yeah.
Absolutely. Everybody's trying to get their kid into the best college, and they're trying to, make sure that their calendars are full of all these extracurricular activities. So again, us being very new to the country at that point, we didn't know. And so basically, I think Junior ROTC was really my extracurricular activity. So when I went to apply for college, not only did I not have any extracurricular activities to show, I wasn't a US citizen. And I still had one more year until I could get my citizenship, till I was eligible for citizenship. You have to have 5 years, right? With a green card, permanent resident. And so I had one more year until I was eligible. So I was really my senior year thinking, how am I going to pay for college? Again, my mom's a single parent, fairly new still to the country, still working her way up. And I have a sister who's 2 years younger than me. I'm trying to do everything I can to get the money for college and not be a burden on my mom as well, right? So the one thing about being in Junior ROTC, it opened up my mind to opportunities in the military. So what I found out was, if you join the Army, you could get the GI Bill, which would help you with money for school, as well as you'll get money for drill and those kinds of things. So that's why I intended to enlist in the National Guard, which meant that I would drill 1 weekend a month and I would do my annual training in the summer, but I could go straight to college after high school once I was done with the training. So that was my plan. It was all about, how do I pay for college? But what happened is, when I went to enlist in the Air Force, at that time they were downsizing, they weren't taking new recruits. And so I couldn't get in the Air Force. So then I looked to the Army, and that's how I ended up joining the Army National Guard instead of the Air Force National Guard. So I ended up going to basic training. After basic training, you go to advanced individual training. I was a chemical specialist at the time. And then I came back and I actually found out I enjoyed basic training. Now, keep in mind, when I'm 17 years old, and when you're 17, because you're still underage, you're not technically an adult, your parents have to sign for you. So my mom, I think she really reluctantly signed the dotted line for me, because she didn't know what to expect. Again, we're still learning about our new country. We hadn't really dived into the military. And so, but she did. She did sign for me. And so I was able to go to basic training. But with that being said, I was also, remember, I was a skinny little kid who was not allowed to play sports, right? My mom ended up letting me join track my senior year, when I had basically made up my mind to join the military, because I found out I would have to run and exercise. So, but it was definitely later in life. But what gave me the confidence, I guess, to go to Army, going to the Air Force, I felt very comfortable after being in Junior ROTC, Air Force Junior ROTC. But the Army seemed like a whole nother animal to me. And like I said, as a 17-year-old, I was concerned that, was I physically able to do whatever, was before me in basic trainings. But what happened is, I had a really good friend, my best friend actually in high school. She was old enough that they have a split summer program, a split option, that if you're old enough, you can go to basic training one summer, come back the next summer to go to AIT, or come back to school the next year to finish your senior year. And then you go to advanced individual training the next summer once you graduate. I wasn't old enough to do that because I was 17 when I graduated. But she came back from basic training, came back her senior year for school, and she was telling me all about it and how much fun she had and all the people she met and all the things she got to do. And that's what really gave me the confidence, because I felt like was, if not, she was just as skinny as I was, if not weaker than I was. At the time, that's what I thought. And I was like, well, if she can do it, then I certainly can do it. So it gave me the confidence to go on to basic training. And basic training was exactly that. It was a lot of fun. Coming from a household that I came from, where my mom was extremely strict, making your bed, getting up early in the morning, working hard. Those are all things we did all of our life. So going to basic training was no different. And on the other hand, there were so many things, again, thinking about the sheltered life that I lived. I got to fire weapons, obviously we did all kinds of physical fitness type things. We just got to do so many things that I would never have done if I hadn't joined the military. So I came back really motivated, and then decided I want to be an officer, and I think I like this thing. And so came back with a very different attitude. So it was really, really motivating.
That's awesome. I remember you telling that story of your friend, and kind of feeling like, if my friend can handle it. I remember you sharing that story at your promotion ceremony when you made general, and I enjoyed that story. So thanks for sharing that. Okay, so you end up getting into college. What did you study in college, and did you pick a major based off of what you thought you might want to do in the Army later on, or at that point it was just kind of I'm going to get through college and do what I need to do so I can, get help paid for college, and then, just go in a different direction after that.
I really wasn't sure what I wanted to do when I went to college. Coming from a family with, again, my dad being a lawyer, my mom being a nurse, my sister knew she wanted to be a doctor. She wasn't a doctor at the time, but she was working towards that. And it was always expected that one of us would be a lawyer, one of us would be a doctor, typical African family, at least a lot of the African families I know. But I knew that wasn't for me. Seeing my mom being a nurse and then law was not for me at all. So I really wasn't sure. I just knew I needed to go to college, and I would kind of figure things out from there. So communications, I took this special program in high school where I worked in communications. I worked at a radio station, and it was just it was fun. And so that was the path that in taking communications, I thought I would go. And I figured I'd start out there. My intent was to get my undergraduate degree. Obviously, simultaneously, I'm working on my ROTC and military National Guard. So kind of a part-time military. And then I had all the intent of moving to Atlanta, getting a graduate degree, and going from there. So that was in my mind as I pursued college before I kind of was derailed into ROTC and going active duty, and kind of my journey changed, which is why I tell people all the time, you should have a plan for yourself, but don't be so inflexible that when an opportunity comes your way, you can't pivot, or you're not flexible or adaptable enough that you miss an opportunity. And that's really what happened. I got on campus. I found out about ROTC. I already was motivated from my drill units, going to basic training in AIT, and my initial training, to where I was motivated to be in the Army. And then learning about becoming an officer just made sense because I was in college. So I found out about ROTC and Reserve Officer Training Corps, and joined ROTC while I was in college, and kind of the rest is history.
Yeah, thank you for taking the time to kind of lay that out, because there are people that are listening to this podcast that I think will benefit from learning about your flexibility, and also, kind of just this concept of sometimes, you just kind of take the opportunity that's in front of you and just see where it takes you. You don't have to have everything figured out, and, to kind of have a 50-year plan for your life that you're rigid about, as you pointed out. So I appreciate you sharing that.
And if I can, just because I know people have have questions because I know they ask me just to point out the difference between junior ROTC and senior ROTC. I would be remiss being the Deputy Commanding General for Cadet Command and not explaining the difference. So junior ROTC is the high school program. And we actually have 1,700 programs across the country and high schools across the country, 275,000 about cadets who participate in Army junior ROTC. Now, there's also Navy and Air Force and other branches, but Army, we have them, and we have 275,000 cadets who participate. Cadet Command is responsible for the curriculum that they take and certifying their instructors at the high school level. All the instructors at the high school level are retired Army officers and non-commissioned officers, and they are hired by the school districts, right? So they don't work for the Army. Now, when you join as a high school student, you are joining the junior ROTC program because it's a citizenship program. It is an elective in most high schools where we have it. It's an elective that teaches you discipline, leadership. It introduces you to service of nation. It doesn't necessarily have to be in the military. We would love for you to join the military, but it just opens you up to service. So they do a lot of community service in their communities, but it's opened up. Maybe you don't want to serve in the military, but you want to serve at the Department of Justice or on Border Patrol or even service within your church, or, it's about serving other people. That's what it's all about. And so then at the high school level, and there is no requirement to join the military out of junior ROTC. At the high school level, and you don't have to be in junior ROTC to be in senior ROTC, it's senior ROTC, which is we have host programs at 274 campuses. But we also have what we call extension units and crosstowns. And that means there are potentially at extension units there, we put instructors there. Crosstowns, we don't. But we have students at both who take classes and will attend either the crosstown or the host to get their classes. And you can take ROTC at the college level for a couple of years just as an elective. But by the time you're a junior, you must contract, which means when you graduate, 2 years, when you graduate, you will accept a commission in the Army as a second lieutenant. And what that means is you're an officer. You actually come in as a second lieutenant versus enlisting and going to basic training and coming in as a private. You go into a leadership straight out of college. And I like to say it's equivalent to going into middle management versus starting at the bottom, if that makes sense. So that's really the difference between junior ROTC and senior ROTC.
Okay, good. No, thank you for that. That makes a lot of sense. What year did you officially join the Army then as an officer?
So I graduated from college in December of 93, and that's when I received my commission. I ended up coming on active duty a couple of months later.
Okay, so you've been an officer, you've been in the Army officially for 31 years now, but just over 30 years, actually. Okay.
So actually, I've been an officer in the military, yes, actually, because it's 94, it's 24, right? So this is actually 30 years. Commissioned in December, that's when I graduated, but I actually came on active duty a couple of months later. But I actually enlisted in 88, so April of this year will be 36 years of total service, including my National Guard service. So a really long time. I know, and people look at me and they're like, what? You've been in the Army that long? You don't even look that old.
Yeah, no, you really don't look like you really don't look like somebody who could have been in the Army for 36 years. That's it, honestly. So that's mind blowing. It's mind blowing. But really
it is
cool.
mind blowing.
Yeah, can you just talk to me a little bit about the journey of going on active duty? I know you've been deployed a few times over the years, and just talk about those experiences and what that's meant to you, what you've some of the things you've learned, and I'm really just trying to get some insight on if I was a young person. In fact, my son Muna, a couple of days ago, we were going into the AT&T phone store. And right next to the store is an actual, Army, Navy, Air Force recruitment office, I guess, at this outdoor mall. And as we got out of the car, we had both our sons. They're asking, "Hey, what are we here to do?" And I kind of jokingly said, "We're going into the Army, Navy, Air Force store because I want you guys to pick which branch of the military you're going to serve in the future." And our younger son Ruda is like, "Oh, Dad, I don't think that's for me, Dad. I'm not sure that's me." But our older son Muna immediately kind of perked up and he's like, "Oh yeah, let's go. I want to go, learn about the options." And of our three kids for sure, he's the one that wouldn't surprise me if he decided that he wanted to, do something like that. So can you talk to us a little bit about, what it's been like actually serving the Army? You've been deployed a few times, what those experiences have been like, and, just that journey, and, as much as you're comfortable sharing, obviously.
Yeah. And I love that. I love that. So the Army or the military is not for everybody, but it's a great opportunity for those who choose to do it. So I never would have thought that I would join the military. And I often think about my family, my background, and think, there was no military. I didn't know anybody in the military. So it started because of education and trying to fund, but certainly I would never stay for 30 plus years based on college. I could have got out a long time ago. But as a lieutenant, I think, and I look back, I feel so privileged to be in this job because I get to talk to cadets and new lieutenants all the time. And it's exciting to see their future that they don't even know, can't even imagine yet, just looking through their eyes and all that's ahead of them. And that's kind of how I felt. So when I was I was getting ready to graduate, I thought I was going to be in the National Guard. And what happened is, the year that I graduated, how the economy is up and down, up and down. And the year the summer before I graduated in December. And the reason I graduated in December is because during Desert Storm, my unit got called up. But because that war was so short, when you're in the National Guard, you have to go to a base to train before you can be certified to go on a deployment. And because that war, Desert Storm, was so short, by the time we were done with training, the war is over. But I ended up having to take a semester off because of Desert Storm. But what happened is, again, economy's up and down, up and down. All this time, I thought I was going to stay in the National Guard because I did serve in the National Guard while I was in ROTC. But what happened is there were all these reports that came out the previous semester that said how bad the economy was, and how kids who are graduating from school at that time, college at that time, were working in McDonald's or working at the mall or something like that. And I just started thinking, wow, I do not want to, after, working so hard in college and having a college degree, I don't want to be one of those people who's working at McDonald's or there's got to be more out there. So because I was in ROTC and because I had options, I switched at the last minute and said I would prefer to go active duty. And so that's what happened. I ended up going active duty instead, because in my mind, I thought, okay, if I go active duty, aviation was a 5-year commitment. So in 5 years, I would have gotten all this experience in the military. I would have a much more complete resume and I would be more marketable coming out of the military. So that was my mindset going into it. And so that's what I did. But then it feels like every time I thought I was going to get out of the Army, I stayed in. So anyway, so I do active duty, I leave, I graduate from college, I go to flight school. I was in flight school for, I think it was a little over a year. And my first duty assignment was at Hunter Army Airfield in Savannah, Georgia, which again was my first job. I was just so blessed to do so many things. So that was my first choice, going to Hunter Army Airfield in Savannah. From there, I went to the Sinai.
And just to clarify, when you say flight school, so you basically became a pilot in the Army. That's what that means, right?
Yes. So in the Army, I always tell people, if you want to fly fixed wing, if you want to fly planes, then you should probably join the Air Force or the Navy. But if you want to fly helicopters, then join the Army. And these are all things that I learned at the time. I didn't know that until after the fact. But I chose, I competed to go to flight school, and I got it. So yes, you're trained for a year down in Fort Novosel. It was called Fort Rucker at the time, but Fort Novosel, which is in Alabama. So you have a year of training. And then from there, you go to your first duty assignment. My first duty assignment was at Hunter Army Airfield, which is in Savannah, Georgia. And everybody, regardless of what your specialty is, as a lieutenant, you want to be a platoon leader. So that's your first leadership role, right? And so it's the first time you are leading soldiers. And I did that at Hunter Army Airfield. So you're still learning your competencies in whatever branch you have, me being a pilot, and you're also now you have a platoon. And I always say it's all about investing in your people. So you're investing in your people, you're learning your job, you're doing whatever missions are coming your way. So that's kind of what you do, and you kind of progress through the ranks. You get to travel different places. From there, I went to Egypt. I was in the Sinai for 19 months, which is a really cool mission out there in the middle of nowhere, in the middle of the desert. Flying helicopters over there as well. And yeah, I just had a series of missions. And in the early days, it's all about learning your craft, becoming competent, leading soldiers. And that's what I did.
That's cool. I remember, I don't think I've told you this before, but your mom was really good about sending, Christmas cards and mail particularly to our grandparents in Bari. And I remember, many times, walking into, Sekuru and Abuya's house, and, there'd be, lots of, birthday cards and Christmas cards from your mom, for sure. But also, she, always add, photographs of you and your sister, kind of whatever, you've got going on. And I remember there's a particular photo that's still, in my head, where I think you're standing right by an Army helicopter, and she'd included a note in there to say, this is what Amanda's doing, now in the Army. And I just at that point I was, I don't know, 12 years old, as a kid in Zimbabwe, and it just in my mind just was incredible that this person that I'm related to is actually flying helicopters and, and doing it just seems so, just so incredible and even out of reach in many ways. So it's really cool to hear you, tell the story of how you got there. But, I'm also kind of just remembering what it felt like, kind of just looking at a photograph and a card that your mom had sent to Zimbabwe, back then in the mid 90s. She was obviously very proud of you. But we also got to tell people too that, hey, I've got a cousin. This is my cousin, and she's flying helicopters in America, and that was really cool. So.
That's funny. I have a box full of cards from my mom. So she was really good about sending letters and cards and all of. I still have them. So yeah, it's pretty cool. But I also remember when Nana and Granddad came to visit. It's the one time they came because they never wanted to travel. It's the one time they came to the U.S. and we were all still in Arkansas. And I remember I had not graduated from college yet. So I was still in college, but I was in the military, and I was able to take them to Little Rock Air Force Base, which was close to our home, and got to show them, that place and planes there. And so that was pretty cool too. So I have a really cool memory of that as well.
That's really cool. Yeah. I actually remember going to the airport with my dad when, to kind of say bye to them when they were getting on this plane. Because if I remember correctly, I think they spent some time in London and then also came and spent some time here, as well. And it was a pretty neat deal because it was their first time ever leaving the country, I'm sure. I don't know if they'd ever been on a plane before that. I can't remember, but it was a special thing. And when they came back too, they had lots of photos, and we were kind of living vicariously through them. At that point, I didn't know that I'd get a chance to come to college in America myself, and eventually, call it home. So I remember that time too. That's cool. You talked about your kind of early career, being deployed a couple of times. I'm curious to hear about, what it's been like, being a woman in the U.S. Army, And then even curious to hear what it's been like too about just being, a Black woman in the Army. And I wonder if you being an immigrant has made a difference in terms of your experience in the Army or not. And just would love to hear your thoughts.
So I can only speak for me and my experience. Interestingly enough, when I go around and talk to cadets, young cadets who are not in the military yet, and they're anxious about what to expect, it is probably the number one question I get from females. What's it like being a female in the military? But I also get the question, what's it like being a minority? So whether it's being a minority, whether it's being a female, whether it's being an immigrant, I am what I am, right? It's very obvious. I can't hide it. It's very obvious I'm a female. It's very obvious that I'm Black. Very obvious and very proud. So one thing is, our mother raised us to be very proud of where we came from, right? And to never forget where we came from. So we are very proud to be of African descent. And I say that just because half Nigerian, half Zimbabwean, but very proud of our heritage, our roots, right? And she taught us always to be that way. And I felt like that was mostly important when we first got to Arkansas, because there wasn't a lot of diversity in Arkansas where we moved at that time. So to stay again, and I was a very shy young girl back then. So she always told us to be proud. So, and we're dark skinned, right? We are truly African. So always, as much as I'm proud to be an American citizen, proud to be here and thankful for all the opportunities, I am so proud of my heritage, where I came from. And what I think that brings to my job, and that's kind of the way I look at it, is I think when you're a minority, regardless of what kind of minority you are, you kind of have a little bit of a built-in empathy, right? And compassion. And regardless of what your job is, it's a people business, generally speaking. And the Army is a people business.
That's true.
You can take away all the technology, or you can have all the technology in the world, but it takes people to operate that, right? And I tell people all the time, and I tell the young cadets that are coming in, soon to be lieutenants and leaders in the Army, that it's all about your people, right? It's all about the people that you're leading. And so you have to invest in them, and they have to know that you value them.
100%.
That you value their input, right? Because the Army is a team sport. You can't do it alone. We're a part of a huge team, right? When we go on a mission, when we're given a mission, it's not something you can do by yourself. So as a leader, you're having to assess the strengths and weaknesses in the people that are on your team. And it's up to you to get the most out of them, out of every one of them. And it really comes from an investing in them so that they can reach their full potential. So I think empathy and compassion, because people are coming from different backgrounds, different perspectives, they have different ideas of things. You just, regardless of rank, you have to show that you value them. And I think that and the fact that you're competent in what you do as a leader, that's how you gain trust. And that is extremely important, because the difference between what we do in the Army and what people do in the corporate world, generally speaking, is that what we do has life and death consequences. What you're asking your people to do has life and death consequences down the road. And that is a big deal, not only for you and them, but you got to think about their family members. No one wants to go to a parent because something happened and their child was killed in the line of duty, Yeah. So it's taking what you do as a leader in the Army extremely seriously, and having the compassion for others, empathy for others, not being quick to judge people, having more patience, the fact that you might be more relatable, and which is why I always get the questions from females about what's it like to be in the Army as a female, or what's it like to be in the Army as a Black person. And I also always say that, again, I'm a very positive person. So I like to think people mean well. And I probably give some grace in that there are people just are ignorant because they were brought up a certain way. They just don't know. Once I tell you, then I expect you to do different. But some people just don't know. So again, I'm one of those people who looks at things positively. But I also recognize that representation matters. So I understand when people look at me as a Black person, as a female, maybe as an immigrant, they see something in themselves. They can now visualize that, oh, it is possible. And I take that very seriously. I took it seriously when I was a lieutenant as a pilot. And people, it's funny because our chairman of the Joint Chiefs, General Brown, he talked about, and it's a really good on YouTube if you haven't seen it, but during the George Floyd thing, he did a video about what am I thinking? I think he called it. But he talks about he's a fighter pilot in the Air Force, and he talks about how even though he's wearing a flight suit, he got questioned by people who are also pilots about, are you a pilot? Just because he's Black. Same thing, but I'm Black and a female. So like an anomaly, right? So you can react to that positively, right? Or you can really have it get you down and react very negatively. And I choose to be very positive about it and educate and inform and all those things. So I also think there's a lot of pressure we put on ourselves. If you're one of few, you have to work twice as hard. You believe you have to work twice as hard. You can't fail because then the next Black person or female behind you may not get the same opportunity. So there's a lot of pressure that you can put on yourself. Right. I like to tell the young cadets and lieutenants now that we've come a long way since I came in. I've been in 30 plus years, right? So I can see the improvements that have been made in the military. So don't wear that pressure, because the other thing is, while you're so concerned about being the only female or being one of few minorities, the people in the majority, they're not worried about that at all. So they're going on to make themselves better, be competent, doing all those things you should be doing while you're worried about, oh my gosh, I'm the only female or I'm the only minority on the staff or this or that. So don't worry about that. You will have challenges down the road. Deal with them then. Until then, just do your job and do the best you can do so that people can't look at you and say that you're incompetent or this or that. But there's a certain focus you got to have, and that's not it, in my opinion. I've always chose to just do my job, keep my head down. If I have an issue, I'll deal with it and move on. I don't hold grudges. And granted, I haven't, there are so many people who've had it so much worse than us in our history, in our past. And they've made it better for people like me. I would hope that I've made it a little bit better for people behind me. So they're not so focused on that, and they can just focus on their job, and hopefully everybody's getting the opportunities based on what they're doing and their experience and what they bring to the table. And no one's looking at the fact that their gender or their ethnic background or those things.
Well, that makes a lot of sense. I think that's very wise. So thanks for sharing that. I'd imagine for you to have been in the Army for as long as you have, and for you to have found the success that you found over the years, that there are many sacrifices that you had to make on a personal level. Can I ask you to just talk about some of those sacrifices that come to mind that you realize were, conscious decisions that you had to make, but it's kind of the price that you had to pay to get to where you wanted to get to?
So probably the biggest sacrifice is having a family of my own. I've never been married. I don't have any children of my own. I have 2 goddaughters who are awesome, but it wasn't intentional. I thought I would. That's, kind of the normal things. But I think moving so many times, I think my first 11 years in the military, I moved like 7 times. With that being said, it was all very exciting at the time moving. I went from, like I said, Hunt Army Airfield to the Sinai in Egypt. I came back for school. Then I went to Korea. Then, and it was all very exciting. But at the same time, there wasn't a lot of time to build relationships. I have huge respect for military families and what they sacrifice. A lot of separation, moving, and work-life balance is hard anyway. So you add the military and what they require of you to it, it really takes a strong family to do that. So I really admire those who are able to do that. But I would say that's probably my biggest sacrifice was, I don't have children. I've never been married. And then constantly moving. Like I said, it was kind of exciting at first. As time goes on, it's not as exciting to move. But like I said, And in the beginning, I'm also the kind of person who looks at the cup half full versus half empty. And those experiences I did have were great when it comes down to it. Like, I have no regrets. I would never go back and say, oh, I wish this had happened. I'm just a realist, right? If my life had gone another way and maybe I wasn't in the military, I probably would have settled down, had a family, and it would have just been conducive to that. But my life hasn't necessarily been that conducive. But that being said, like I said, I don't have any regrets, and I've had so many opportunities that I know I wouldn't have had. And I've been able to live a life that, again, with my upbringing, I never knew really was possible. I didn't know anything about aviation, didn't know anybody in aviation. Because my mom was so strict about sports and stuff, I've been able to do things I would never do, like jump out of airplanes, rappel out of helicopters. I've been skydiving and hang gliding since, because I've been able to do that. Like, I did things. I've run, I don't know how many, not marathons, but half marathons and other races that I don't know if my life would have taken me that way, if I had not joined the military. So it really opened me up on the other side in a different way than certainly my life was going, based on my family history and everything I was exposed to.
Thank you for just being transparent about that. I think that'd be helpful to many of us learning that. I remember when I got the chance to come to your promotion ceremony when you were promoted to the rank of general. And, you had a few of us family members that were able to join for that very special ceremony. And the general that actually promoted you, that did the ceremony, General James Rainey, I believe, was his name. He came over, into kind of one of the the rooms we'd been given to sit in as we waited for everything, to start, and introduced himself to us, and had a conversation with each of us. And the one thing he kept saying as we were talking was, you guys should really be proud of Amanda, because this is a big deal. This is a big deal. And I remember him repeating that statement. And so I'd love for you to, maybe just talk to us about how big a deal is that, making general in your own words. I don't know. I've tried to do some research to kind of find out how many generals there are in the Army, versus the total Army population and things. And I don't know that I found reliable numbers or statistics, but if you've got that information, I'd love for you to share it. But just in your own words, how big a deal is it that, for somebody to make the rank of general?
Yeah, I don't have the numbers myself, but I know it's a big deal. I think I told you, we grew up with a mom who told us we could do anything we put our minds to. All it takes is hard work. She truly believed in education. So obviously you had to be educated, and nothing would ever be given to you, but no one is smarter than you. You can do it. You just have to work. So we were raised that way, right? But even still, I never imagined, right, that I would be a general in the Army. Never. I'm actually surprised I even stayed in the Army as long as I did. There's just different circumstances and like opportunities came up over time that I stayed, and I love it. Like, no regrets. It's been an amazing ride. But yeah, it's absolutely a big deal to reach the rank of general officer or flag officer, like admirals. It is one of those things I don't think you can really put into words, but kids or students cadets ask me all the time, did you always want to be a general? No. Not only did I never looked to being a general officer. It wasn't even really in my cards. Like, it just wasn't. And I'll tell you why, because when I transitioned to being a public affairs officer, there's only one public affairs general officer in the Army, right? And in the 18 years or so leading up to me pinning on, that slot for a public affairs general officer was taken by a combat arms officer. They never put a public affairs officer in that slot. So why would I ever think why there was a path for me? We did a couple of years ago have the first one since I've been a public affairs officer. So, but generally speaking, my whole, for the last 20 years, there's no reason to think I would be a general officer. I literally was looking for, when's the right time to retire? I think I've even told you, like people, family members ask
Yeah,
me over the years,
yeah.
when are you gonna retire? And I'm like, oh, it should be in the next year or so. I'll be retiring, you know? So I was looking to be retired. It was not expected at all. So I would just say that the fact that Army leadership selected me to be a general officer, it is just extremely humbling. It's just hard to put into words because it's so unexpected. It's not something someone like me would aspire to. And it's just, I feel privileged. I feel honored. And when it happens, you just automatically, and I feel like all through, when you get promoted, every time you get promoted, you're like, okay, now I have more responsibility. You kind of step up into it. Sometimes you're already serving at that level and then you get promoted, but you're kind of stepping up into it. This is like a whole different level. And you recognize the weight, I guess, of the opportunity, right? And so I just feel extremely honored, extremely humbled that I was chosen. And I do recognize that this is not something that happens every day. And I just try to do my best to uphold the position, the rank.
That is awesome. Thanks, Amanda, for that. As we, start to wrap up, I'm sure there's some, important lessons that you've learned along the way that maybe you get to share when you meet with younger cadets out there, but also that you could share with us.
Sure. I think I've mentioned some of them. The biggest thing is the Army is a team, right? I tell cadets who are about to join and they're kind of concerned about jumping in. It's about, we're team builders as officers in the Army, as leaders in the Army. We're problem solvers, but it's really about building a team because we can't accomplish any mission basically we're given without everybody coming together. So like I said earlier, people first, it means investing in people. It means taking the time to get to know them. It's helping people reach their full potential. Because ultimately, if people are able to reach their full potential, they're satisfied in what they're doing, they're going to help the team. It all comes back to the team. And then I truly believe that trust is important as a leader in everything that we do, right? If your team recognizes that you place value in them, that you're investing in them, that you're competent in what you're doing and what you're asking them to do, then they're going to trust you, right? And that's what it's all about. And then we talked about it before. You got to have empathy and compassion, regardless of who you are or what your background is. Everybody's going through something, right? People are coming from vastly different backgrounds, which is one of the cool things about the Army is it really is a melting pot of people from all across the United States and outside the United States on the enlisted side, right? And then, of course, there are officers too who have become citizens as well. So it's a really nice melting pot of people with different ideas. So it's a matter of, do you value them or not? And how can you best get the most out of those people and help them reach their full potential? So when I say people first, because the Army says people first, that we talk about it all the time, I truly believe that. And I truly believe in people, right? Regardless of all the things over the years that you've experienced, it's really the people that make it happen, right? And it's the people that you remember. You could be deployed around the world, away from your family, in a really challenging situation. And it's the people who are going to help pull you through.
That's true.
Right? So that's what it's all about. And those are probably the best lessons. Those are the things that I tell young cadets and second lieutenants who are new to the Army. I try to make sure that is at the top of their priorities. You got to be competent. So you got to learn your craft. They're young, so they're learning their own craft, right? Making sure they become experts in whatever their line of business is. But then in order to get anywhere and be successful in the Army, it's about the team. So those are probably my best lessons.
Oh, well, thank you. As we, wrap up this interview, I know over the years when you thought, you'd be retiring from the Army, sooner than you've managed to do. You've talked about kind of a career post, the Army. At one point, I think you had real interest in maybe getting involved with an organization like the NFL in some PR, public relations, type capacity. And I'm curious to hear from you if, that's still something that you've got on your, to-do list for later on post the Army, or do you think that, you've got enough on your plate right now to, where you're going to keep going for a while, in your current role?
So when you get to this level, I actually had some a cadet ask me this week. This week I was in South Carolina, the week before I was in Oklahoma. And a cadet this week asked me, how did you choose your job, like the current job I'm in at Cadet Command? And I told him, you don't get to choose your job at this level. Yeah. They tell you where you're going, right? But it is, again, it's a privilege to serve at this level. So, and sometimes they have ideas for you that you don't even realize are an option. And that certainly is the case with this job. So, and it was great. It's been a great job. So very thankful to be here. So yeah, I actually thought I would be retired years ago. And yes, there was a time when I thought about the NFL. I don't know that that's what I want to do now, but I do. Communications has, I really enjoy communication. So whether I continue in that with the government, a nonprofit, corporate America, everyone needs a good communicator and everybody needs those type of skills. But really, when it comes down to it, if I can find something post-Army that gives me the same sense of purpose, it's meaningful work, I can continue to serve others, that ideally is what I would want to do. I don't have anything specifically lined up. I don't know when I'm retiring. Certainly it will be sooner rather than later. My days are definitely numbered. I know that. So I need to be thinking about it, but it's just not yet. And I guess I still have some time to think about it. But ultimately, it would be nice to continue to do something where you're serving others. And it's just work that you feel a sense of purpose, kind of like what you do.
I get it, and I appreciate that, but I don't doubt that when the time comes, you'll find the right fit, and I think you'll make the transition work really well. But I know I've kept you much longer than I'd asked you to be available, so I want to wrap up. There are lots of people that are going to watch this or listen to this podcast who may want to have access to you, to be able to communicate with you, or at least kind of keep up with what you're up to. And I know you're, quite active on a couple of social media platforms. Can I just ask you to share, where, if somebody just wanted to follow what you're up to, the best places that they can find you? Sure.
On LinkedIn. I'm easy to find on LinkedIn, on Twitter at Amanda Azubuike. And I'm also, you can find me on Instagram. I have a personal account, and then I think Azubuike_IG, and then I have the ROTC account. So lots of places online to find me. Oh, thank you, Amanda, for, just spending this time with me and just sharing the story. I read a quote a few weeks ago where somebody was saying, hey, do you realize that you are your ancestors' wildest dreams? It kind of resonated with me, and in the sense that I realized that there are things that I'm getting to do in my life today that, we talked about, you and I's, grandparents, right? Just how the things that you've gotten to do with your life, neither of them could have ever imagined for themselves or in their lifetime to be possible. And there's, so many things too that I've been blessed to participate in, things that I get to do even today on a daily basis that are just incredible. Grandparents, even my own parents, there are things that I get to do today that my dad, would have been blown away by. And so I am really proud and really grateful that, we get to live in this day and age and to do some of the really cool things that we can do, the meaningful, impactful things that are helpful to other people, serving other people, and hopefully making the world a better and safer place, and so on. And I don't take that for granted. But I just say that I'm really proud, to be able to, call you family, to be able to call you my cousin. I'm really proud that you and I, essentially
I guess if I'm doing the math correct, 50% of our DNA has to be similar since our parents had the same parents. So it's just really cool that this is what's come out of, our grandparents and on both sides of our families, hard works and determination, their pursuit of education and the pursuit for opportunity. And my hope is that the people that are listening to this episode today will be inspired, whether they're young immigrants or not, whether they're American citizens that are just listening to this just out of fascination. It is really possible to really do, cool things. I feel especially blessed to be living in America because I still think that America, truly is the land of opportunity. And I don't know that there are many places in the world that a young Black British-born girl, could move to at age 14 and a few decades later be a general in the army. Like there are not many places in the world that this story is possible. So it just blesses me. And I'm really grateful to you, Amanda. I know America holds the military in high esteem, I'm constantly, around people that are thanking people in the military for their service. And it's a big deal. It's a big deal. And so for me to have somebody that's committed their lives to that in my family, means a lot to me. So thank you for your service. Thank you for, your love of this nation, but also just being so incredible to all of us, even as family. And it's been a true pleasure, getting to have this conversation with you today, Amanda. So thank you.
Thank you, Munatsi. Thank you for having me. I agree with everything you said as far as our grandparents and kind of living their lives. I think the only thing that makes me sad is that both my parents and your dad as well didn't get to see, you know what I mean? This part of it. Because you're doing amazing things, just bringing stories and everything you do. So that's the only, I think someone asked me about becoming a general, and I told him it's a bit bittersweet just because I just know my mom would have been my dad too, obviously, but my mom, just because she really raised me. She was so proud. And my dad, I think I told this story at my promotion as well, but when I graduated from flight school, my dad was like, okay, now you need to go to medical school or law school. But he called me when I was getting promoted to colonel, and I got promoted to colonel. That was officiated by General Rainey as well. We had been talking about it, I guess, and my dad was not coming to my promotion, but we had talked about it. And the Sunday before I got promoted, he called me. The Sunday I got promoted, that following Friday, he called me and he said, I just wanted to remind you to send me photos. And this was before virtual, was a thing, right? This was back in 2015 or 16 when I got promoted to 06 to colonel. And he called me just to remind me to send him photos because he knew I was getting promoted that Friday. So that was the first time I was like, oh, he really is proud of me. Yeah. He's kind of turned around since I didn't go to medical school. I didn't go to law school, but he is proud of me because he really wants those photos. And unfortunately, he passed away like 3 days later. That was the last time I talked to him. Oh, wow. So I didn't even get to send him those photos, but I had that conversation with him. So it was like, so same with the promotion to Brigadier General. I know my mom would have been so proud because even though it wasn't, we talked about retiring and all of that, they both would have been so very proud. So it's kind of bittersweet, but I absolutely understand what you're saying about we get to live out our dreams because of our parents and our ancestors. I often think about what I could have been born anywhere. Well, I wasn't born in Zimbabwe. I wasn't born in Nigeria. I was born in England. Yeah. I ended up here. Like my life could have been anything. So I'm extremely, extremely humbled. And it took a whole lot of people to get me here. It certainly was not me by myself. I had a lot of people on my side. And that's the other thing I tell young females and young minorities. In order to get here, there aren't that many officers, and certainly weren't in my chain of command, that look like me. So don't concentrate on those who look like you, because others are the ones who got me promoted. And that's likely going to be the way it is for you as well. There are a lot more good people in the world than there are not good. So
Agreed.
Thank you. Sorry
Agreed.
it took so long to actually sit down and do this, but I certainly appreciate what you're doing, and thank you for the opportunity.
Thanks again to my dear cousin, Brigadier General Amanda Azubuike, for agreeing to spend some time with me today and to share this story. I know you're really busy, Amanda, and don't take your time and this commitment for granted. To our listeners, please like this podcast and follow us on your favorite podcast player. You can catch us on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or any other podcast player that you like to use. We're also on social media under the name Immigrates. You'll find us on TikTok, Instagram, X, which used to be Twitter, and we'd love for you to follow and interact with us on any of those platforms. You can also visit our website at immigrates.net, and you can enter your email address to join our growing community, and we'll be able to let you know when we release new episodes and share some facts about some of the people we'll be talking to over the next several months. Thank you again for your time. Until next time.